Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nofal, and these are today's stories. Rival political leaders gather in Ain al-Tine for the first of 3 national dialogue sessions aimed at breaking numerous deadlocks in government. Russia must not conduct offensive operations in Syria and keep Syrian President Assad's government from doing so. And U.S. President Barack Obama rebuked some high-profile assertions from Donald Trump, telling veterans organizations that America's military remains the finest. Future movement leader, former Prime Minister Saad Hariri, held separate consultations with the members of the Future Parliamentary Bloc, as well as Progressive Socialist Party chief MP Walid Jumblat, on the eve of what is 3 days of consecutive national dialogue sessions. Now, earlier in the day, Hariri had presided over a meeting for the Future Bloc to discuss the general situations on the eve of the dialogues. Speaker Nabih Berri has called for the August 2nd, 3rd and 4th dialogue sessions in a bid to resolve several stalled issues in the country, hoping that the meetings would bring solutions and urging that the parties make use of time and try to reach agreements with all due responsibility. And so rival political leaders are gathered in Ain al-Tine for the first of 3 national dialogue sessions aimed at breaking numerous deadlocks in government. Media reports are saying that Berri is urging rivals from the beginning of the session to agree on an all-inclusive solution, starting with the election of a new head of state. However, expectations are low that the feuding between March 8 and March 14 parties, which have failed for more than 2 years to elect a president and endorse an electoral law, will make headway on the 2 contentions issues this week. Berri warned political rivals that the all-party talks presented the last of a very important opportunity to break the current deadlock and revive paralyzed institutions. The Syrian regime's key ally, Russia, launched heavy airstrikes overnight on the outskirts of Aleppo city, showing a last-chance assault by rebels seeking to break a government siege. The assault began on Sunday and is intended to ease the encirclement of the opposition held east of Aleppo city, where an estimated 250,000 residents have been under a regime siege since July 17. The British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights described it as the largest rebel attack in Aleppo since 2012, when fighting reached the city and left it roughly divided between the opposition control in the east and regime forces in the west. However, government troops backed by Russia's Air Force have put up a fierce defense. The strike comes despite an appeal by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry for Russia to restrain itself and its ally in Damascus. Kerry said Russia must not conduct offensive operations in Syria and must keep Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government from doing so. His statement comes as Syrian rebel fighters launched a major assault on all government-held southwestern parts of Aleppo to try to reopen supply lines.
It is critical, obviously, that Russia restrain both itself and the Assad regime from conducting offensive operations, just as it is our responsibility to get the opposition to refrain from engaging in those operations. Now, my hope is that we can arrive at that. If we can't, nobody's going to sit around and allow this pretense to continue. These are important days to determine whether or not Russia and the Assad regime are going to live up to the UN, live up to the cycle, or not. And the evidence thus far is very, very troubling to everybody.
Turkish parliamentarians visiting the U.S. warned that the failure to return opposition figure Fethullah Gulen, who Turkey says is behind the failed coup attempt, will affect regional stability and is unacceptable from an ally. Turkey has been angered by the West's response to the July 15th coup attempt and an apparent U.S. reluctance to hand over the cleric it says was responsible.
Washington not returning Gülen to Turkey would not merely be a matter of relations between two countries. It is intimately and direct connection to the regional stability. At a time when the power struggle is at its height, the possibility that the man responsible for a bloody coup attempt in Turkey should remain in an allied country and possibly escape the US without getting arrested is unacceptable. Right now, through testimonies from different actors, from a teacher to judge, from a high-level military personnel to police, we know clearly that he's responsible of this horrendous act. And if you go to Turkey, more than 90% or almost close to 100% people think he's behind this coup, and there's a reason for that, and that should be understood, but it is not easy. This is a esoteric organization, a type of apocalyptic structure, not easy to understand, but we know very well from his statements, his followers' statements, they are directly involved, ordered, organized this bloody attempt.
Coming up next, U.S. investor Warren Buffett speaks at a rally for Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. U.S. President Barack Obama rebutted some high-profile assertions of Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump, telling a veterans organization that America's military remains the finest in the world, and says that families who have lost loved ones in battle deserve the nation's respect. Trump has repeatedly asserted at campaign events that the U.S. military has declined in prestige and capability during Obama's presidency. He told members of the Disabled American Veterans Organization that the U.S. military will prosecute the war against Islamic State until the group is destroyed.
Let me say something else about this generation. As Commander-in-Chief, I'm pretty tired of some folks trash-talking America's military and troops. You know, our military is somewhat smaller after two major ground wars come to a close. That's natural. And we're going to keep him doing everything we need to do to improve readiness and modernize our forces. But let's get some facts straight. America's Army is the best trained, best equipped land force on the planet. Our Navy is the largest and most lethal in the world. The precision of and reach of our Air Force is unmatched. Our Marines are the world's only truly expeditionary force. We have the world's finest Coast Guard. We have the most capable fighting force in history, and we're going to keep it that way. And no ally or adversary should ever doubt our strength and our resolve. And we will keep pounding ISIL and taking out their leaders and pushing them back on the ground. And united with a global coalition, we will destroy this barbaric terrorist group. They will be destroyed. In the face of Russian aggression, we're not going to turn our back to our allies in Europe. We're going to stay united in NATO, which is the world's strongest alliance. From the Asia Pacific to Africa to the Americas, the United States and our armed forces will remain the greatest force for freedom and security and peace that the world has ever known. That is your legacy. That is what we have to protect, and that is what we have to defend. And let me say this. No one has given more for our freedom and our security than our Gold Star families. Michelle and I have spent countless hours with them. We have grieved with them. There's a reason why last week in Philadelphia, I was humbled to be introduced by Sharon Belkofer from Ohio, a Gold Star mom whose son Tom, a lieutenant colonel in the Army, gave his life in Afghanistan. I requested Sharon to introduce me. because I understood that our Gold Star families have made a sacrifice that most of us cannot even begin to imagine.
U.S. investor Warren Buffett, speaking at a campaign rally for Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, challenged Republican Donald Trump to release his tax returns. Trump said he would not release his returns until the Internal Revenue Service has completed an audit. Buffett also announced that he is launching a program to transport voters to the polls on November 8th for the presidential election.
You will learn a whole lot more about Donald Trump if he produces his income tax return. And so that's why I'd like to make him an offer. An offer I hope he can't refuse. Donald Trump, at one point, he says various things at different times, but at one point, and he said it several times, is that he can't do it, can't release it because he's under audit. Now, I've got news for him. I'm under audit too. And I would be delighted to meet him any place, anytime between now and election. I'll bring my tax return. He could bring his tax return. Nobody's going to arrest us. It is not. There are no rules against showing your tax returns. And just let people ask us questions about the items that are on there. If a monkey had thrown a dart at the stock page, the monkey on average would have made 150%. But the people that believed in him, that listened to his siren song, came away losing well over 90 cents on the dollar. They got back less than a dime. And you know the history of his enterprises where he was borrowing money, where one time after another he went into bankruptcy. I've really never known another businessman that brags about his bankruptcies. And no member of the Buffett family has gone to Iraq or Afghanistan. No member of the Trump family has gone to Iraq or Afghanistan. We've both done extremely well during this period, and our families haven't sacrificed anything, and Donald Trump and I haven't sacrificed anything. But how in the world can you stand up to a couple of parents who have lost a son and talk about sacrificing because you were building a bunch of buildings? I mean, that is, when I heard that, my mind went back, and this goes back before most of you were born, but they went back to the McCarthy hearings. And at the time of the McCarthy hearings, at the time of the Senate McCarthy hearings with the Army, Joe Welch had a young assistant of his maligned by Senator McCarthy. And McCarthy went on and implying this guy was a communist and doing all kinds of things. And finally, Joe Welch couldn't take it anymore, and he said, and I'll quote him, "Have you no sense of decency, sir?" And I asked Donald Trump, "Have you no sense of decency, sir?" I have pledged today that on Election Day, November 8th, I will take at least 10 people to the polls who would otherwise have difficulty getting there.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Rival political leaders gather in Ain Tini for the first of 3 consecutive national dialogue sessions aimed at breaking the deadlocks in government. Russia must not conduct offensive operations in Syria and must keep Syrian President Assad government from doing so. U.S. President Barack Obama rebukes some assertions from Trump, telling a veterans organization America's military remains the finest in the world. Your Tuesday headlines live on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal signing off. Have a good one.